Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Hello everyone. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars. My name is Amanullah Sand. I facilitate virtual programs at Teacher Development Webinars. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars. Teacher Development Webinars is a selection project to support teachers and educators around the world with professional development opportunities. It is an initiative using the rise in online professional development to connect people from around the world with opportunities we would not have had due to the old normal of face-to-face conferences. And for this webinar, I'm pleased to introduce Mary Catherine Boehmer. Mary Catherine Boehmer is a TESOL and technology specialist. She holds an MA in TESOL from Teachers College Columbia University at Sloan, and additional MA in Educational Technology Leadership from George Washington University. Mary has served as an English language specialist with the US Department of State in Kazakhstan, Pakistan, and Russia, where she has worked to leverage technology to expand English language programming, reach, and impact. Prior to her time as an English language specialist, Mary served as an English language fellow in Baku, Azerbaijan. As a fellow, Mary designed and implemented a sustainable framework for large-scale MOOC facilitation throughout Azerbaijan. Her areas of interest include educational technology, content-based instruction, competency-based learning, and culturally responsive pedagogy, particularly technology, to be more culturally relevant to the target culture. What a pleasure to have you at Teacher Development Webinars. Mary, welcome to Teacher Development Webinars.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's really great to be here. I am actually in Pittsburgh at the moment. I was at the TESOL International Conference presenting with a colleague on a project that we recently did in Pakistan, and also got to meet a group of amazing Pakistani educators for the very first time in person. And I got this beautiful lamp from Multan, from one of the teachers who participated in my project the past few months. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to talk about artificial intelligence and to continue working with some really fantastic Pakistani educators and educational administrators from half a world away. So should we get started? Yes? All right. Okay, so, I guess I have to share my screen first. There we go. And slideshow. All right, so welcome. Today what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be looking at how we can support language learning through artificial intelligence. And we're actually going to try out some of these tips and strategies ourselves, just to kind of see and decide for ourselves, are they effective? And we're gonna explore kind of what it means to use artificial intelligence, what exactly artificial intelligence is, because I know for a lot of people, you hear a word like artificial intelligence and you think it's some really big, complex technical thing. Maybe you think we don't even have internet all the time at our school or in our district. But there are a lot of ways that you can use AI, which is the short form of it, without needing a whole lot of access to technology. And it has a lot of really amazing uses to support language learning. So today we're going to go into that a little bit. We're going to look at what the research says, because before we do anything, we want to make sure there is research that says that this is a good approach to using a kind of technology support for language learning. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. If you have questions in the chat, every, 5 to 10 minutes or so, I'll take a look and see if there's, anything that's come up or any comments that people have shared. And I will try to address those the best that I can. However, it's early over here and I am only on my second cup of coffee, so I might be a little bit slower than normal. All right, let's continue. All right, so first of all, we are going to talk about what is artificial intelligence. And throughout this presentations, we're going to refer to artificial intelligence as AI. AI is just much shorter, but I did want to name it as artificial intelligence because I know for me, I don't like it when there's a lot of acronyms describing something that maybe I'm not so familiar with. So all AI is really is just it's outsourcing thinking that you could do on your own to some form of technology. It's letting a machine think for you. It's letting a machine use intelligence in the way that you would normally use it. And again, it sounds really complex. And maybe you're thinking, I still don't understand what that is, but don't worry, we're going to get there. So what does AI include? Like I said, AI is basically any way that you would use a machine to do your thinking for you. So I have my phone right here. And let's say I wanted to know 55 times 2.2. Okay, now I could do that math in my head right now, or I could take a pen and I could work it out on paper. I don't want to do that thinking. So instead, I'm going to just have a machine do it for me. And I have a calculator on my phone right here. And so I'm going to figure out what that is. If anybody can beat me to it using their own brain, great for you. 55 times 2.2, 121. There we go. So I just used AI. And we might not think of it as AI because, I mean, calculators, that's not something new. That's something that's been around for a really long time. And because there's so many like new ideas within AI, oftentimes we forget that things like calculators are also AI. It's basically you could do the math yourself, but instead you've decided to outsource it to a machine because that's one part of your brain you don't really have to use if you don't want to. So you outsource it to a machine. So a calculator, just a calculator. This is a form of AI. Google Maps. I am currently in Pittsburgh. I don't know the city very well. Every day I had to walk to the convention center. And to walk to that convention center, I could have found a map of Philadelphia or of Pittsburgh and marked the route myself. But I didn't. Instead, what I did was I used Google Maps. I'm not sure if you can see that on the screen, but I used Google Maps. And again, I could use a map myself, but instead I decided to outsource it to software. I decided to have Google Maps figure out how I get from point A to point B. I'm letting a machine do some form of thinking for me. And these are two uses of AI that I use all the time. I would assume you use all the time. You just don't think about it. We also have autocorrect, right? When you're writing something and then you get the spelling wrong, and then either you get the little red underline notification that it's spelled wrong or that your grammar is incorrect. That's a form of AI, right? I could check my spelling and grammar myself, but instead I'm outsourcing it to software. I'm letting the software do that part of the thinking for me. Predictive text. I'm trying to write a message. My phone is making some suggestions about what I could say. That is also a form of AI, right? I could think for myself what to say in a particular message, but predictive text is doing the thinking for me. So these are uses of AI that I would guess most, if not all of you use every day. What do you think? Are these uses of AI that you use in your regular day-to-day lives? Does anybody use Google Maps or anything like that? Yeah, it's a pretty common way to use it. That's all AI is. It sounds really complex, it sounds really complicated, but really all it is it's just you using a machine to do some thinking for you. And there are, of course, like bigger, applications of AI. But for the purposes of our conversation here, we're going to be looking at what are people using? And we're going to be looking at how can we use that to support language learning. All right. So let's take a look a little bit at AI in low resource contexts. So I know in Pakistan, there are definitely some regions where there's kind of limited access to a lot of digital technologies and tools. Smartphones. Maybe very few people have smartphones. Maybe none of your students have smartphones. Computers, maybe you have no computer, your students have no computer. Maybe there's one computer in your entire school. Broadband internet, maybe you have it, maybe you don't. Maybe you have it unless for some reason there is, you know, an internet shutdown because of a holiday or something like that. And same with electricity. So when we're thinking of low resource context, this is kind of what we're thinking of. We're thinking of settings where not everybody has a smartphone, not everybody has a computer. Maybe you, even as a teacher, don't have access to a computer in your classroom. No access to broadband internet or electricity. That can be in the classroom or outside of the classroom. But if these are things that you often find yourself kind of not always having on hand, that's something to think about. Because you can use AI really easily in low resource contexts. And actually, it's a really powerful way for you to develop students' digital literacy skills, even if they don't necessarily have, you know, the really wide range of access that you would hope that students would be able to have in an educational setting. So when we're thinking of low resource context, because in a low resource context, we have limited access to things like smartphones, computers, broadband internet, and electricity. Recently, in particular with COVID, we have talked a lot about this concept of the digital divide. And that is the concept of a gap existing between those who have access and know-how regarding digital tools and technology. So kind of those who have access and those who don't have access, and kind of that gap growing wider and wider and wider during COVID, when so many of us really relied on technology to be able to connect to anyone. There is a perception, unfortunately, which is untrue, that there is a digital divide. And because there's a digital divide, because maybe you are teaching in a low resource setting, you know, that you aren't really able to use AI for language learning. You know, maybe you say, I'm the only one with a smartphone in my classroom. I don't have access to internet in my classroom. That might be true, but that is not going to prevent you or your learners from using AI if you want to use it. AI is everywhere. You use AI every day. I use AI every day. Every time you use a calculator, you're using AI. Every time you type a text message and you have that little underlined red letter or underline in red that you have spelled that incorrectly, that is AI. So you're using AI every day already. And when we think about the best types of technology to use as students and to use yourself as a teacher, what you want to be using is what you're already familiar with, what you're using. You should not be making additional barriers to accessing technology. And these are tools that most likely you're already using in some way or another in or out of the classroom. Oh, wow, we've got people from everyone. All right. Pakistan, Ecuador, very exciting. So as I was saying, there's applications of AI that are applicable, beneficial, and promising even within these low resource contexts. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of what the research says about using AI for learning, and then we're going to try out some different strategies for using AI. All right, so you may be asking yourself now that you know what AI is, how can I use that effectively? How can I use that for language learning? And there's a difference between correcting language and language learning. And we're educators, right? So what we're going to be focusing on is language learning, right? So we're not just looking at how can we have perfect language and a perfect product. We're looking at how can we make this process to mastery of language better. So the solution for incorporating AI effectively is, first of all, take into account your existing systems. If you are in a context where, smartphones are not allowed in the classroom, you have to take that into account, right? You have to work with whatever systems you already have in place, because if you don't, then quite frankly, your use of AI is not going to be successful. So Okolo, the researcher here, he actually did research on some doctors in Thailand. And basically, they were at a hospital that used this app where they could take pictures of certain medical issues in their patients and upload it. And then once they uploaded it, a specialist could take a look at the picture and provide a diagnosis. Sounds very cool. Unfortunately, the existing system did not allow for it to work that well. First of all, internet was really slow. It took a really long time for the pictures to upload. The internet was not always there. And to take a picture that's really good and upload it, that requires, a decent amount of technology. And it would take so long for these pictures to upload that doctors were focusing more on trying to upload these pictures. And in the meantime, all these patients were kind of like backing up in the queue, and they would have a backlog of patients. And then after that, the doctors got really frustrated, and basically they just didn't want to use the app at all. So it seems like a good idea, right? Take a picture of some kind of medical issue on a patient, upload it, send it to a specialist, they give you a diagnosis. Great, but it didn't take into account the existing systems. And the result was that there was a lot of skepticism about using systems like this. A lot of patients were neglected because doctors didn't have the time to both successfully upload images and treat patients. And so that was something that did not necessarily work within the existing system. So if you're in a setting where, in particular, you don't have a lot of access to resources in your classroom, take that into account, because you can't change a lot of the existing systems. And so if you're going to use AI effectively, especially for learning, you really have to take that into account. The next thing that you really want to be looking at is using what is called participatory design. Participatory design sounds a lot like participation, right? And basically what that means is when you design how you're going to use AI, you need to ask some questions. You need to ask, do my students want to use this? Are my students actually interested in using AI in the classroom? That's part of participatory design. Do you, as a teacher, want to use AI in the classroom? I hope after this presentation you do, because AI has some really cool applications for language learning. But if you are not bought into the idea of using AI, it's not going to be effective. How can you work together with students to make this happen if you want to use AI? How are you getting their input? So these are important things if you're going to use AI effectively. The next thing that you want to be looking at is you want to look at it as a human-centered solution rather than just a simple technical issue to be solved. You want to look at how and why humans are interacting with AI. So let's say I pull up my phone, I pull up Google Translate, and I decide to translate something into Urdu. Okay, so I'm translating something into Urdu. Great, I just used AI to solve a problem. Why did I why did I translate something in Google Translate just now? Any thoughts, any ideas? So if I'm using Google Translate to translate a message from one language to another, right? I'm using it, just basically as a way to solve a technical problem. My technical problem is I don't speak, Urdu, so I'm going to use Google Translate. Why would I do that? And why would I use Google Translate? Why wouldn't I use a dictionary instead? And why would I even want to translate something into Urdu? Because I can. Okay, right. But why? Oh, it's faster. Thank you, Tahira. So it's faster. So that's a big thing. I could get a dictionary, but that requires a lot of my mental energy. It saves time. It's faster. Also, I want to communicate. I don't know Urdu at all. Hello from Pittsburgh to our participant from Sudan. Yeah, and then also I want to communicate, right? These are teacher development webinars. They're based in Pakistan, right? The person who invited me is from Pakistan. Many of the participants are from Pakistan, right? So it's an attempt to connect with the language using AI. So you want to be thinking about the how and why are you using AI, right? A lot of times it's faster and it's easier. And that's an okay reason. And then the other thing that you really want to keep in mind is that the perceived ease of use is important with any use of technology. So Park et al., they came up with this idea of the technology acceptance model. And basically what they found is that perceived ease of use is really, really important. Perceived ease of use is not the same as ease of use. So if you have ever known how to use some kind of technology tool and tried to explain it to somebody else, you may see this. In the US during COVID, we had, I'm not sure how many, but I think it was close to 50% of English learners had the digital tools and the internet to log into their classes, and they didn't. So they had those tools, but they perceived them to not be something easy to use. So perception is important. And then again, just a reminder, AI is basically getting a machine to do some thinking for you. Calculators, Google Maps, autocorrect, predictive text. These are all forms of AI you use every day, and these are all forms of AI that you can use in language learning. So now let's look at language learning specifically. So why should you use AI to support language learning? Maybe you're not really sold on it. That's okay, we can keep working on it. So first of all, many AI uses for language learning require very little technology. Google Translate, for example, I can download that on my phone. I can download one of the language sets on my phone. So let's say I don't have access to internet in my classroom. Okay, if I have a smartphone, I can download whatever language whatever the whatever the first language of my students is, and I can download that and I can have that on my phone. And that's not something that I necessarily need internet for in the moment. I can download it when I do have internet. Google Maps. You can download cities on Google Maps. If you want to take a field trip with your students to somewhere in the US, you can download a city on Google Maps and you can explore it on Google Maps together. So once that's downloaded, you can use it. You can use it with or without internet. You can do that on a computer. You can do that on a phone. Calculators. I don't need any internet to access my calculator. So a lot of these AI uses that we've talked about today really don't require a whole lot of technology to navigate or a whole lot of support to make them happen. The other thing is that AI helps a lot with what we would call multimodal literacy development. So when we're looking at multimodal literacy, we're looking at what your students already know and what they bring to the classroom. So cultural literacy, what do they know about Pakistan? Using what students already know. Media literacy, if anybody's done any look at some of the media literacy programming that we have with the Office of English Language Programs, then you know that media literacy is understanding how and why media is created. Digital literacy, your students are coming to the classroom at least knowing some technology tools. Using low-tech AI can help learners bring tools that they already have and merge them with skills that they are beginning to learn. All right. So, and now let's look a little bit more specifically at using AI to support language learning. So many AI uses for language learning require very little tech, as I mentioned, and using AI can make the language classroom more engaging for learners. And then kind of going back to this idea of multimodal literacy development and multiliteracies, we really have to acknowledge that there are diverse learning styles. When you're using AI, you're activating critical thinking, you're helping make deeper connections and deeper understanding, and you're allowing for understanding language in more complex, nuanced, and rich ways. So this is something that Fernando mentioned. So contextualizing the meaning of words according to different perspectives. So that's, an example of a way that you can use AI to activate deeper thinking. So now we're going to take a look at a study. So this study was done by a researcher named Lee. And basically what this researcher did was they decided to look specifically at how AI could be used to help language learners. And they decided to look at the use specifically of Google Translate for low-level writers. So for a lot of teachers, you might think that Google Translate is a taboo. It's a shortcut, it's the easy way to do it. And students should not be using Google Translate. They should be doing all the work themselves. So we do want to acknowledge that. But in this study, basically what happened was students planned their essays. They wrote it in Google Translate in their native language. And then they revised it using Google Translate, peer reviewing, and teacher support. And they used Google Translate to do individual edits. And their outcomes were pretty impressive. Their outcomes show that this led to higher quality writing. It led to greater metalinguistic awareness. So basically, their students were able to better understand how language, both their native language and English, work. And it allowed for a lot more self-directed learning, which is really important. We want our students to be self-directed learners. We want them to be motivated to continue learning on their own time. So this is a pretty big thing. So some of the takeaways from this study were, first of all, Google Translate should not be taboo. If anybody has ever had an open book test, it's not cheating if it's allowed, right? It's not cheating if whatever your assessments are designed to take that into account. So keep that in mind. And Google Translate is only kind of taboo and a shortcut when it's used alone. When you're only using Google Translate, yeah, it's a shortcut. But you don't want to be using AI in the form of a quick fix. You want to be using AI in a way where you're working with it and working with other elements. And then the other thing too, you need buy-in and support. You need to ask, will this use of AI be helpful for my students? Why or why not? So we're going to try this out. I'm going to be your language learner right now. And we're going to be taking a look at this how-to guide. So basically kind of mimicking the study that we just learned about. So we're going to try it. We're going to see how effective it is. And these are the steps to how we're going to do it. And these are the steps to how you might use Google Translate in your classroom in a way that actually supports language learning and not just as a quick fix or a shortcut. So remember, Google Translate is only a shortcut when it's not used with these other supports, when it's not used with peer editing, when it's not used with, getting feedback from the teacher and making continued revisions and edits. Google Translate in this case is just kind of one piece of it, but it's a very helpful piece. All right, so first of all, students plan and brainstorm what they will write about. All right. So, like I said, we're trying this out. I have an assignment for my Urdu teachers. So in this context, because these are the teacher development webinars in Pakistan, they've given me the assignment to write a paragraph describing my favorite food or drink. So step number 1, students plan and brainstorm what they will write about. So this is coffee. I'm going to write about coffee, I have decided. So great. Step number 1 is done. Now for step number 2. Students write their first draft of their paragraph or essay in Google Translate in their native language. My native language is English. And then students translate their paragraph or essay. A lot of the time, Google Translate will just kind of automatically do the translation. And if this is the case, just skip to step number 4. So we're going to try this out. I'm going to pull up Google Translate. Here we go. All right, so I have decided that I am going to write about coffee, which is truly the best food or drink ever. All right, so what can I say about coffee? So I'm drinking coffee right now. I'm a bit tired because it's very early over here. Let's see, what else? What else can I say about coffee? Without coffee, I am extremely grouchy. Very true. So it's important that I have it every day. My favorite kind of coffee is dark roast coffee. I lived in Azerbaijan for 2 years. And when I visited cities outside of the capital, often there was only and that was really difficult. So anyway, I really like coffee. All right, cool. So I have my translation here. Let's take a look. Anybody speak Urdu? How did I do? No way, too so much better. I strongly disagree, Fernando. How did I do? How's my Urdu?
Yeah, that's good. It says मैं अभी काफी पी रहा हूँ, but it will be पी रही हूँ. It's a feminine, so yeah, so little.
Okay,
So yeah, this kind of gender discrimination by Google Translation.
Yeah, all right. So first of all, we're gonna get back to that. But thank you. I appreciate the feedback. And that's like that step where the teacher is giving me feedback, right? Okay, so we've done that part. Now we're going to return to my paragraph. So my Urdu is, I don't speak Urdu. I'm a very low level speaker of Urdu. And so, we want to keep that in mind because this is mimicking what happened in this study. However, my English is really good. I'm a native speaker of English. I know how to write in English, so this is no problem. But I gotta ask you, is there a clear main idea in English? Maybe you don't speak Urdu, but look at the English part of it if you are an English speaker right now. Do I have a clear main idea? Yes or no? In English or in Urdu, do I have a clear main idea? So remember that the topic is describing my favorite food or drink. Did I describe my favorite food or drink? Is there a clear main idea? Oh, Nadia says it in capital letters. No, no, there is no clear main idea. I just kind of like said a whole lot of different things about coffee, right? But am I describing it? Am I describing coffee? Or am I just like saying kind of random things about coffee right now? So if I were to make this something with a clear main idea in English, I would go back to the prompt. So our prompt is write a paragraph about your favorite food or drink. So I'm going to go in my native language, I'm going to add this topic sentence. Generally, it is about coffee, right? Or it's about how I feel about coffee, but that's not the same as describing it, right? If I'm describing it, I'll be talking about the coffee itself. So this paragraph will be about my favorite food or drink. My favorite food or drink is coffee. All right, so I've added that. I've made that edit in English. Right, I'm giving my opinion, right? An opinion is not the same as a descriptive paragraph. All right, good. You're starting to see this, right? There's a lot more to writing than just vocabulary and grammar and going from one language to another. All right, so I've added this now. All right, so this paragraph will be about my favorite food or drink. My favorite food or drink is coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now. I'm a bit tired because it's very early here. Without coffee, I'm extremely grouchy. So it's important that I have every day. Wait, oh, okay. Have it every day. Good. My favorite kind of coffee is dark roast coffee. I lived in Azerbaijan for 2 years. And when I visited cities outside the capital, often there was only instant coffee, and that was really difficult. So anyway, I really like coffee. So taking a look at this, did I follow the prompt directions the first time? Not really, but the second time I did, right? So I was able to see, like in my native language, oh, there's not a clear main idea. This is just kind of like random thoughts, kind of all coming together. Is the writing genre appropriate, right? So I was told to write a descriptive paragraph, but somebody, yeah, Fernando pointed out, I'm giving my opinion, right? I'm saying, you know, what I like more than I'm describing it. Did I use transitions well, right? Is my paragraph cohesive? Does it all flow together, or do I just kind of have like an idea here, an idea here, an idea here? So I don't know Urdu very well at all, but I do know English really well. And I can tell you as a native speaker of English that when I look back at this is not very good writing. I'm not following the directions. These are things that I'm not doing, right? I did not get to the point at all. Thank you, Luis. Yes, that's a very, very good point. I did not get to it at all. All right, so I've added a clear main idea, all right, because I've recognized in my native language that, you know, I need to have a clear main idea. Is there anything I should get rid of? What do you think? From the English side, and then we'll go to the Urdu part. If I had to get rid of one sentence in here, what should I get rid of? What do you think? And just to make it more coherent, more cohesive, which sentence should I get rid of? Sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, sentence 4, sentence 5, sentence 6. What do you think? Which sentence? Otherwise, I'm going to randomly choose. Yeah, okay, all right, great. So Alev says I should get rid of this sentence. I lived in Azerbaijan for 2 years. Great. All right. Sentence number 5 too. Okay, all right. Okay, there we go. All right, so this paragraph will be about my favorite food or drink. My favorite food or drink is coffee. I'm drinking. Okay, you wouldn't get rid of them, you would add connectors. Okay, all right, Fernando, that's a really good point. All right. For me, I think I really, as a native English speaker, I'm seeing that I'm kind of going all over the place. So, I think I'm going to get rid of this and this and this and this. I think I'm going to get rid of a lot of it. I'm drinking coffee right now, but I'm going to use Fernando's suggestion. And I'm gonna add some connectors. I'm drinking coffee right now because it's early and coffee has caffeine. Okay, there we go. Caffeine is a chemical that makes you more awake. So the coffee I'm drinking is from a Keurig machine. I don't know if you know Keurig machines, but they have like a little pod and then you like close it. All right. All right, so the coffee I'm drinking right now is from a Keurig machine. There are a few different ways you can drink coffee. Let's see. There are a few different ways you can drink coffee. You can use a French press, a mocha. I feel like I'm spelling this wrong. Mocha. I'm not describing my coffee, all right? Oh, so you want me to describe the coffee I'm having right now? Okay, I can do that. All right, so the coffee I'm drinking is from a crate, but then that's describing the coffee I'm having right now. So it's still not quite on the topic. All right, so a mocha, a coffee maker. It's a cold coffee, I know. It's really sad. All right, so a coffee maker, or a coffee machine. There are 3 kinds of coffee: light roast, medium roast, and dark roast. My favorite type is dark roast because it tastes very rich. Okay. All right. So how is this? Is this better than my first draft? What do you think? Have I improved it? Hope so. I worked really hard on this. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, much better than the first draft. So again, even though I'm not even looking at the Urdu piece of it right now, right? I'm still like revising with your feedback in my native language. All right, so now we're going to go to Urdu. So Amanullah, can you give me some feedback on what I should change in the Urdu part? So I'm just going to like click around and you can tell me like what might not look well or might not look great.
So Urdu part looks great, but again, all those verb you use for the Google translation using verb for which we use for males are it's kind of yeah. So gender thing is missing. All these yes. So we'll say ये पैराग्राफ मेरे पसंदीदा खाने या मशरूबात के बारे में होगा. मेरा पसंदीदा खाना या मशरूब काफी है. मैं अभी काफी पी रहा हूँ. तो so पी रहा हूँ means with a male, so he's drinking a coffee. Yes. But
would it be
in
possible?
Urdu we'll say पी रही हूँ.
Yep. So teacher, would it be possible for you to write that correctly in here so I can revise my essay?
So sure.
So can you so you said the first sentence is not correct because of the gender, yeah?
Not first sentence, it's third, I think. First is correct.
Okay, what about this one? How's this one?
It's also correct.
Okay, this one?
Yes.
Okay, this one? Whoa. Okay.
This is correct.
Okay, this one?
I'm drinking coffee right now.
Okay, this one? Wait, hold on. Oh, I have to redo it. Hold on. I think. Let's try this again. Okay. All right. So which one was it that I should change?
It was the third one.
Right here?
1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yes,
one?
on the second line. On the second line. After full
Okay.
stop. Yep. Yeah.
This one? Okay, so that one needs to change. Okay, great. Can
Yes.
you tell me how I should write it? Can you write it in the Zoom chat?
So I don't have Urdu keyboard right now, so I
Okay, all
can't. But
right.
yes. So
But
yes, yes. There's only one letter. Raha will be changed into Rahi. Kafi pi
okay.
raha hu. Yes. Means
Mhm.
I'm. And if you were to say it, gender mix, so it will be Rahi. So in a more democratic
Okay.
way, they should.
All right.
Yes.
So
They should give both the options, Raha and Rahi.
okay, all right. So I want you to kind of notice what just happened here. So I got a lot of feedback about my writing style in English. Yes, absolutely. It would be so much better if you focus on your only on your coffee, and only a little correction that's always required by the teacher. So if I were a student, let's say I'm using Google Translate, let's say it's a low resource setting. So I'm using the Google Translate on my phone. I downloaded it, right? And then I write this by hand. And then my teacher comes around, and my teacher maybe circles a few things that I should fix in the language I translate it to, right? And then the teacher will
So now,
explain exactly what the challenge is and I can change it, right? And I remember that a lot better, right? Because that's a really targeted piece of feedback. And I can kind of keep going back and forth and back and forth. But we just had a whole conversation. And he, not only explained to me what my mistake was, but why it was a mistake. And, just because of technical issues, was not able to show me exactly how to write correctly. But in the classroom, that's not what the case would be. So yeah, Luis is bringing up some really good ideas for how to make my overall writing better, right? But what we want to think about, especially in second language writing, is that there's a lot of things going on. There's writing well in your first language, and there's writing well in a second language. And we want to be bringing what students already know with them to the classroom, right? That idea of multimodal literacies. Your students are bringing a lot of knowledge, right? Your students have a lot of knowledge about how to write well in their native language. Often, even if they're not the strongest writers in their native language, they can definitely use what they know in their native language and then bring it to another language, right? So this is probably the most effective use I can think of for AI in the writing classroom. Google Translate should not be taboo. It should not be considered a shortcut. However, remember, you need buy-in. If your administrators say, no, you can't use Google Translate, it's going to make it tough. If your students think it's a shortcut, that's going to make it tough. If you think it's a shortcut, that's going to make it tough. But what you want to be focusing on is not looking at the tool as a quick fix. You want to look at it as something that you can use in a process. Yeah, they should absolutely prepare this in advance, right? But the other thing too is a lot of this was self-directed. So I did ask some feedback from peers. I did ask some feedback from, my Urdu teacher, right? But a lot of this was just kind of me being self-directed with my edits, right? Even in my native language. And that's what we want. We want students who are self-directed in their learning. It will take a little bit of preparation, yes, but I hope that this how-to guide is helpful for you. If you want to use this in your classroom, this is basically the general structure. And remember, grammar and vocabulary are not the only things that make for strong writing. It's really easy when students write something in English for you to think, oh, grammar's wrong, vocabulary's wrong, right? But there's so much more that makes writing good. There's so much more that makes writing cohesive and focused on the topic that they should be writing about. There's a lot of elements to good writing. So again, this is your how-to guide right here, using Google Translate to support language learning. This is how you can use it. So we tried that out. There's our how-to guide again. And just really remember, Google Translate may seem like a shortcut, but it's really only a shortcut when it's not used with other supports like peer and teacher feedback. You saw how much I was asking for peer feedback. You saw how much I was asking for help from the teacher, right? If those elements are not there, then yeah, it's a shortcut. You also want to remember what Lee found in this study, right? There was more self-directed learning among learners, not just in this one situation, but in the future. That's a really important skill to have. Improvements in writing skills overall, in both the native language and the target language. These are long-term gains. This wasn't just, oh, they wrote a good paragraph one time. They found that these students were able to develop greater metalinguistic awareness. They were able to really better understand their own language as well as the language that they're learning. In this case, we'll say it's English. And it really led to some really excellent long-term improvements in writing. But the last thing that I'll talk about at this time is remember our rules about using AI. Remember, it needs to be participatory. Are you using Google Translate like this or as a shortcut? Keep in mind how and why you're using it. You also want to be thinking about, what are your administrators saying about Google Translate? Are your administrators saying Google Translate, no, we can't use it in our school? What about your fellow teachers? If you tell them you're using Google Translate with your writing students, what are they going to think? Do you think they would buy in? Do you think that they would be open to it? What about your students? Maybe your students think Google Translate is a shortcut. Like, what do people think about using this form of AI in language learning? If your answer is no to any of these questions, it's not going to be effective. However, if you think that this would be a good way for you to use it in your classroom, and others are skeptical, continue trying to educate them. Continue trying to, make them aware that these are really the best ways. It's a lot of the same ideas with student-centered learning. A lot of teachers, really want to use student-centered learning, but, maybe that's not really how things are actually done in your education system. And you got to continue trying to educate them. It's a little bit at a time. So just continue letting them know, like, listen, AI can be a quick fix. Google Translate can be a quick fix, right? But it can also be used as like a really amazing tool to make your life easier. If I'm doing a math problem, right, and I'm using my calculator, that's helpful. I still need to know how to do the math, right? I still need to know how to do the formulas. All the calculator is doing is just calculating it for me. It's not telling me how I actually use the formula. It's just calculating. That's it. And you want to think of Google Translate like that. It's one piece in your arsenal of learning writing skills. Just like a calculator should be one piece in your ability to solve a particular math problem. All right, so I think we're out of time. I had a few other ways for you to, I had a couple of other ways for you to use AI, but it seems like we are actually, unfortunately, out of time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, take a look at some questions. So I have a question for
we're not short of time. Yes, you can take your time.
Okay. I think I do have a flight in about 2 hours. So I'll answer the questions that we have here. So I'll take like 5 minutes or so to answer questions. And then I think
you can,
sign off. All right. So Fernando.
You can talk about it if you want. Time, I think.
Yeah, I think I'll just go for questions at this time. So question, what is your opinion in relation to using virtual reality in the classroom? What are some advantages and disadvantages of VR? So virtual reality is not something I have a lot of expertise in. I know that some early research is saying that VR is like a really cool tool, that it really helps immerse students. But I will say that, especially in low resource contexts, or even in high resource contexts, it's really difficult to implement it. Like virtual reality headsets are expensive. They take like quite a bit of figuring out how to use them. So I had a friend who worked in a school district, and her school district purchased, I think, like 300 virtual reality headsets before realizing they actually didn't have the other technical part they needed to be able to actually use virtual reality. And so I can't really speak to that. I think there's a lot of promise right now. However, I can't speak to that definitely, but I would say kind of a lot of things I brought up in today's webinar, which is participatory design. I think if you are using virtual reality, everybody needs to be on board, number one. And number two, I would say technology acceptance model. The perceived ease of use of it is important. You can see that I perceive virtual reality to be really difficult to use right now. And so that perceived ease of use is important. So I think that's the best answer I can provide at this time. All right, so I think that was our only question. Are there any more questions before we wrap up?
So I see this question from Imran from Turkey, and he said, what do you think about the latest advancements in language testing that use AI? And if you could share, something, how can it be more effective in the near future?
Yeah, so I think in terms of language testing and AI, most of the applications for language testing and AI are looking at how to make tests adaptive. And so I think that adaptive testing is a much more accurate way for you to measure what your skills are. And I know that that's where a lot of different testing organizations are going. So ETS, for example, released a new TOEFL test. I forget what it's called, but this is an adaptive test, and it just gives you a much clearer measure of language ability. And it also includes a video in it, which isn't AI related, but you record a personal video kind of to introduce yourself to any organizations that will be getting your TOEFL score, which is also quite cool. But I don't know if anybody has ever been to an eye doctor, but when they do the lenses and they say, okay, 1 or 2, and then 3 or 4, that's what adaptive testing is. Basically it's saying, okay, is 1 better or 2 better? Okay, if 2 is better, this is the path we go down. And then we kind of have these branching sort of scenario. So I think AI and language testing is a really amazing tool. I think it gives us a more accurate estimate of language ability. And I think there's a lot of exciting applications there. Any more questions before I sign off?
Yes, if you have any questions, please put them in chat, and taking questions to Mary. And I see someone mentioning about the first robot English language teacher in Japan.
Sorry, could you repeat that? It cut out for a moment.
Yes, so someone is mentioning about first robot English language teacher in Japan.
I'm so sorry. It keeps cutting out like right in the middle of what you're saying. Is it possible to type the question or copy and paste it into the chat?
So someone was mentioning the first English language teacher was a robot in Japan, robot English language teacher.
Oh, okay, very nice.
Yeah, so as an example of AI, but I don't see any other questions now. Thank you so very much, Mary Boehmer, for having you at Teacher Development Webinars, and we enjoyed your session, and it was a bit different one, and so it adds to the diversity of topics. So I really appreciate that, and I know it's too early for you, but I appreciate your commitment and dedication. And I also appreciate that coffee with recipe.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah. So for certificates, you can afford our certificate on demand. You can contact on info.tdwebinars@gmail.com. For our future webinars, please visit us www.tdwebinars.org. and keep a check on all our social media channels. We're available on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and a recording for the session will also be available at Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel. Don't forget to share and subscribe. So yeah, also you can share your takeaway from this session using hashtag TDWebinar. Take a TD House on Twitter and all other social media platforms. I appreciate your presence today. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.